And then at the end of the evening, like at 8 o'clock when students have left and all that good stuff, I want to meet with the leaders for 5 minutes, something like that, and just talk through kind of what's happening here this summer. So lots of random little meeting thingies happening tonight. Starting on May 5th, we plan to have the cafe reopen at the beginning of the evenings. So, yeah, you can bring money, eat a little something before things start up. We're still going to keep the menu real simple for now. We might bring back like the pretzels, corn dogs, Hot Pockets, stuff like that. But we're not going to like bring back pepperoni rolls and stuff because if you don't buy them, they go stale and then we waste our money. So we'll bring back some stuff, not all of it, and we still expect you to mask up and chill out, not be spitting all over people's faces and stuff. So, sound good? All right, so I'm just going to dive right in. We'll take a break after I talk a little bit. Jake will sing a song, and then we'll plow into some new stuff for the evening, okay? So last week we talked about how Jesus invited 12 guys to be his disciples. In other words, Jesus invited them to do life with him, to travel with him, to serve with him, to follow with him. We talked about the fact that these were all pretty ordinary guys. A lot of them were fishermen. And that led us to the point that Jesus doesn't always look for the smartest, most highly educated people to follow him. If you're here tonight and you have a learning disability, Jesus can still use you. If you're here tonight and you struggle to keep your grades up, Jesus can still use you. If you're here tonight and you have no intention of going to college after high school, Jesus can still use you. One of the men that Jesus invited to follow him was a tax collector. Tax collectors were typically thieves back in those days. Whether Matthew, the tax collector that Jesus invited to follow him, was a thief or not, we know that his job had given him a bad reputation. And that led us to the point that Jesus isn't all that concerned about your past. He can use anyone. He can use bullies and druggies and alcoholics and bad mouths. He can use thieves. Don't think that you've been too bad, that you've wandered too far to turn around and follow Jesus. Don't think that Jesus is going to hold your past mistakes over your head. Don't think that your past mistakes will embarrass Jesus. He wants to forgive you. He wants to give you a fresh start. He wants to give you a bright future. Jesus also called a political nut. He called a zealot to follow him. And that tells me that even people who are a little over the top, a little weird, a little obnoxious, that even those people can be used by Jesus. That Jesus isn't afraid to associate with the weirdos. And that's good news for y'all, right? Jesus wouldn't look at a single person in this room and say, "You're not good enough to follow me." Not a single person. He wouldn't say to anyone in this room, "Fix yourself and then we'll talk." No, like his invitation to you is the same invitation that he extended to the 12 disciples 2,000 years ago. And that invitation was, "Follow me." And some of you have accepted Jesus' invitation to follow him. Some of you have accepted the message of the gospel as truth. Like you've come to grips with the fact that while God created you to be with him, to have a personal relationship with him, your sin, the stuff that you thought, said, and done to dishonor God, separated you from God. Some of you have come to terms with the fact that you can't do anything to work off your sin on your own. There's nothing you can do to measure up to God's perfect standard. Some of you have made the decision to let Jesus take care of your sin problem for you. And he's okay with that. In fact, he willingly died on a cross to pay the price for your sin. He did what he did so that your relationship with God could be restored. When you decided to put your faith in Jesus, when you decided to stop trying to work off your sin and to let Jesus take care of your sin instead, he celebrated. He gave you a gift. The gift of forever life with God in heaven. The gift of an always there helper for the rest of your life on earth. Some of you haven't accepted Jesus. Like, that follow me invitation is still just kind of hanging out there. At least you haven't accepted the invitation yet. You can't help but wonder whether God is really there. And if he is, does he really love you? You see, people who know and love God, and you see him struggle, and you're like, that doesn't make much sense to me. Like, is it really worth it to follow Jesus if it's going to be hard, but I'm still going to struggle? I want to tell you something. It's worth it. It is worth it. Accepting the gospel and following Jesus is worth it. There are going to be a lot of highs and a lot of lows. There will be times when your faith is unshakable and times when you can't help but wonder if God is even there. But if you commit to following Jesus through all of it, you're not going to regret it. I can promise you that. Jesus' mother sure did. So how do we go from the gospel to Jesus' mom, just like that? The answer is skill. Like, that's all I got. That's how we did it. The rest of this evening's talk is going to be about Jesus' first recorded public miracle and the events leading up to it. It's going to have a lot to do with Jesus' mom. Are y'all ready for this? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pray. Jake's going to come up and lead us in a song. And then we're going to dive into a section of the Bible that is really, really cool. God, I pray that as we hang out here tonight, as we spend some time in the Bible, as we talk about Jesus and all that he can do in and through our lives, I pray that we would leave here excited to serve you this coming week, that we would be a better example, a better representation of Jesus in the coming week than we were this past week. God, I pray we get exactly what we need to out of being here tonight. We pray this in your name. Amen. Let's stand up and sing. Y'all sounded great. So there's a version of that song that they sing in like 5 different languages. And like an hour before we started, I told Jake if he could learn the song in all 5 languages and perform it that way tonight, that basically I'd give him $500, and he failed. So, sorry for your loss, Jake. But you know who could give him $500 is Azarian, because he won Water Assassins.
Woo! Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
You're supposed to give me a Frosty.
I know, that's what I forgot about.
Unbelievable.
I'll get you a Frosty.
Okay. I like the 2 flavors swirled together. Just
That's disgusting.
Oh, I like it.
and if you want to throw in some French fries, I like to dunk my fries.
Yes, sir.
There must be a thing.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know how to recover from that. Other than the fact that the song, How Great Is Our God, reminded me that in just a few weeks, we're going to have like a big show of how great our God is right here at the Escape. We're going to call down fire from heaven. The whole place is going to, no, just kidding. Actually, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be baptizing some students. After saying the fire down from heaven, I almost accidentally said sacrificing some students. So that in a couple of weeks, Malachi and Destiny will be sacrificed to God in the place. Actually, they will be baptized in water and fire. That's actually a thing in Scripture, like they talk about water and fire and the Spirit and all that stuff. But we're just going to baptize them in water. On May the 12th, that's a Wednesday night, we're having a family night. I made these cool little flyers. They're at the front desk. I want you to grab 1 or 2 of these before you leave tonight. Take them home, give them to your parents. Invite them to come that night. The cafe will be open that night, so when you bring your parents, you can be like, hey mom, dad, buy me food. And you might get some food. We'll be selling all of our merchandise, t-shirts, hats, beanies, whatever. So yeah, don't just bring your family so they can buy you stuff, but bring them so that they can see this place and know what's going on, and they'll get to hear the gospel. So if you've got family that doesn't know and love Jesus, bring them that night and we'll introduce them to Jesus, okay? Your siblings can come that night if you've got younger siblings. Listen, please, don't just bring a 2-year-old without your parents. Like, that's not a good idea, like, on any account. So if you're like, I just want to bring my 2-year-old sister. Well, your parents need to come if you're bringing your 2-year-old sister. But if you've got a sibling that's in like 3rd or 4th grade or something and you want them to tag along with you, you can bring them that night. If you've got an older sibling that's too old to come here, they can come that night as long as they're not creepy and they're not going to hit on anybody. And if same thing goes for your parents, bring them unless they're going to be creepy and hit on people. That would be really disturbing. And I'm pretty sure Jeff back there at the security desk would just tackle him. So, and we would expect him to. So don't bring creepy people. Bring nice people who you want to see this place and need Jesus. And so that actually excludes some of you, because some of you are creepy. So maybe just don't show up that. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. Mainly Sarah. She's back there grunting like a dude. I don't know what's going on.
We talked about this. My voice gets lower when I'm excited, right?
Oh,
She like straight man.
that's weird.
Right now.
Most people it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Like when I get excited, I start talking like I'm a 3rd grade girl.
Yeah,
So-
I
Yeah.
was normal.
Okay.
I'm a lot of things. Normal's not one of them.
You're quirky.
Quirky.
Oh, speaking of quirky, our Sunday night group is meeting this Sunday night. That's an inside joke right there.
Great way to sell it.
Sunday nights are real weird. Okay, so we're going to look at a few verses written by one of Jesus' close friends and disciples, a guy named John. We'll start in the book of John, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Who wants to read these for me? Yes. Wow, I thought that was Ribion's hand for a second. And I'm like, he's normally more reluctant. Like, I always know he's going to raise it, but he waits for somebody else to volunteer. But Mel, you're here, and you just saved his butt. So, hit it.
The next day there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration.
Good job, thank you. According to verse 1, this story takes place the day after Jesus invites the first few guys to follow him. What do these verses tell us? They tell us that Jesus and the men with him, Jesus and his disciples, were invited to a wedding party. And Jesus' mom was there too. How many of y'all have ever been to a wedding? Yeah, okay, cool, most of you. How many of you have ever been to a really, really long wedding? Yeah, me too. Luckily, most long weddings include food and something to drink, right? Like if you go to a long wedding, that's kind of like the thank you for sitting through our long wedding. Most of the time they have a reception with a lot of food. Well, this wedding that Jesus and his mom and his disciples went to was probably a pretty long one. Back in those days, wedding celebrations weren't just hours long, they were days long. And they didn't just have food, they had feasts. We're talking like a week-long wedding reception at Golden Corral. Like, that's the idea here. That's the kind of thing that was expected in those days. As long as there was plenty of food and drink, the party just kept rolling. Well, it would seem that at this wedding party, a few too many heavy drinkers showed up. Check out what verse 3 says. The wine supply ran out during the festivities. Okay, so before somebody freaks out, yes, Jesus was at a party where people were drinking wine, okay? Some people would say that wine was different back in Bible times, that it took a lot more wine to get drunk back then because of how it was made. Was that the case? I don't really know. Like, I read a whole book on it in college, and it's just like, honestly, nobody really knows. I don't know. Some people would use the fact that Jesus and his mother and disciples were at this wedding party with wine to justify partying and drinking. And that's definitely a stretch. Remember when we talked about Jesus' temptation in the wilderness a couple weeks ago? Did Jesus ever cave in and make a bad choice? No, he didn't. Did Jesus give in to Satan's invitation to sin? No. And how did he resist? He knew the Bible, right? He used the Bible. Well, the Bible makes it crystal clear, both in the Old Testament, part of the Bible written before Jesus came to earth, and in the New Testament, the part of the Bible written after Jesus came to earth, that getting drunk is a sin. That getting drunk dishonors God. What's my point? Jesus was at this wedding party where wine was being served. He and his disciples may have even had some to drink, but they wouldn't have got drunk because Jesus wasn't one to give in to temptation and sin. Now, maybe some of y'all are going to leave here thinking, sweet, Jesus drank wine. If Jesus can do it, so can I. To that I say, slow down, okay? Like, before you run home and grab a can of your dad's beer out of the fridge or a bottle of wine out of the fridge, you gotta remember, it's not legal for any of you to drink alcohol. Like, period. Like, those of you who are students in this room right now, it doesn't matter whether Jesus drank alcoholic wine or not, you cannot. Because for you to drink it would be sin, because according to the Bible, we obey the law of the land, and the law of the land says if you're under 21, you ain't drinking alcohol. So whether or not the whole Jesus drank some, Jesus didn't, was it alcoholic, wasn't it? You just don't even need to worry about that right now. Because if you go home and drink alcohol, you are sinning because it's against the law. So that was all free, like just random soapbox rant. You're welcome. So if you've been drinking alcohol, feel bad about it, because you should. If you haven't been drinking alcohol, just don't. Like, let's just decide not to now. Like, there's no point in experimenting with it. Just stay away from it. It makes you stink and it makes you fat. Okay? Anyway, the wine runs out during the wedding celebration. Bad news. It'd be kind of like if I said we were going to have an all-you-can-eat pizza party, and after everybody's had like a slice, maybe two, the pizza's gone. Like, that's not all you can eat. if I'm going to an all-you-can-eat pizza party, I want to eat all of the pizza. And I don't want you to think that I'm just saying a lot of pizza. I mean all the pizza. Thank you, Parks and Rec, for that. Has anybody seen that show? That show's hilarious. Ron Swanson, all the bacon and eggs, good stuff. As far as we can tell, the fact that the party ran out of wine wasn't common knowledge. In other words, I don't think anyone stood up and said, "Party's over, we're out of wine." Like, no, I think there was just some, "They're out of wine" rumblings going around. Someone close to Jesus caught wind of these rumblings. Jesus' mother, she hears, "Party's out of wine, what are we going to do?" And what did Jesus' mother do? Check out the end of verse 3. It says, "So Jesus' mother told him, 'They have no more wine.'" And what was Jesus' response? Verse 4, "Dear woman, that's not our problem." Jesus replied. In other words, Mom, bless your heart, but the fact that the person throwing a party ran out of wine is not our problem. Like, not our circus, not our monkeys. Like, this is not on us. But then, Jesus said something a little weird. Check out the end of verse 4. Jesus said, "My time has not yet come." My time has not yet come. Like, what's that supposed to mean? Well, I think if you snap the fact that Jesus' mother came to him with the "we're out of wine" problem and this phrase together, like, just kind of deductive reasoning here, you'll come to the conclusion that Mary expected that Jesus could take care of the problem. And I don't think her expectation was that Jesus would, like, run out and buy wine either. Like, "Hey, disciples, jump in the van, we're going to Walmart." Like, I don't think that's what Mary had in mind. I think that she expected that he could just make it appear, that he could do a miracle. But Jesus shut her down. Like, maybe it was one of those, "Oh, Mom, you're embarrassing me" moments. I don't know. But for whatever reason, Jesus resisted her subtle, "they're out of wine" suggestion to do something about the problem. Just like any proud mama, Mary was determined that her son could take care of the problem now. And check out what Mary did in verse number 5. "But his mother told the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.'" In other words, "See that young man over there? That's my boy. Do whatever he tells you to do and you'll have wine." Like, apparently the servants listened to Mama Mary, which also happens to be my mom's name, and she basically does the same thing, because things start getting interesting in verse 6. Somebody read this for me. "Yes, Mel, you're taking all the weight off of Rib tonight. Come on, Rib. You gotta get that hand up there faster." Okay, hit it.
Standing nearby were 6 stone water jars, used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, "Fill the jars with water."
All right. So the servants went to Jesus and said, "Your mom told us that you have a secret stash of wine. What do we have to do to get the wine?" And Jesus doesn't give the answer that they were expecting. Jesus said, "All right, guys, see those water jars over there? It's going to take about 120 gallons of water to fill all those things. So get busy." Like, those were the instructions. Now, keep in mind, this would not have been a particularly easy task. This is 2,000 years ago. Like, they couldn't just turn a knob on a faucet to fill up the jars with a hose. And that would have taken long enough. Like, it takes a while to fill up 120 gallons of water, but they didn't even have that luxury. So, Mary had instructed, go talk to Jesus, do what he says. They did what Jesus told them to do. And they did what Jesus told them to do until the job was done. Check out the end of verse 7 and 8. Who wants to read it?
Oh.
Rev, take it away.
When the jars had been filled, he said, "Now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies." So the servants followed his instructions.
I changed my mind. I like it when Mel reads better. Just kidding. You're joking. I appreciate it. So that was mean. So the jars are finally full, and what is Jesus' next instruction? Dip some of the water out and take it to the guy emceeing the party. If these guys hadn't questioned Jesus' sanity to this point, I have a pretty good feeling that they started to question his sanity, like, right here, right? Maybe they had a little talk with Jesus. Jesus, like, we didn't have a shortage of water. We knew where to get more of that. People were upset because the wine is gone. If we take a glass of water to the master of ceremonies at this party and tell him the wine problem has been solved, we're going to get fired. I don't know what Jesus did to convince them, but what we do know is that they did, in fact, dip water out of one of the jars and take it to the master of ceremonies. And, verse number 9, when the master of ceremonies tasted the water, it was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though of course the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over. So one of the servants worked up, the most epic cell phone I've ever heard. So one of the servants worked up the guts to take a glass of water from one of the jars to the life of the party, and to his excitement, somewhere between the jar and the lips of the MC, the water turns into wine. How cool is that? But the servant wasn't in the clear yet. The master of ceremonies called the bridegroom over. Like, uh-oh, this is probably not going to end well. Here's how the conversation between the MC and the groom went down. Who wants to read it for me? Take it away.
A host always serves the best wine first, he said. Then, when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you have kept the best until now.
Good job. Dude, like, you've been holding out on us. That's probably what this conversation sounded like between the groom and the master of ceremonies. It's like, most people serve the best stuff and save the cheap stuff for last. You saved the best for last. I feel like the groom was just kind of like, yep, I sure did. I have no idea what this guy's talking about. Like, that's about how it would have gone. But the servants knew what he was talking about. Jesus had just worked a stinking miracle. Like the first one recorded for us in the Bible. Verse 11, this miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So what prompted this miracle? What led Jesus' glory? What led to Jesus' glory being revealed? What led to the strengthening of his disciples' faith? Someone who knew what Jesus was capable of opened her mouth and encouraged others to trust him. What led to this miracle? Let me say this again. Someone who knew what Jesus was capable of opened her mouth and encouraged others to trust him. Had Jesus ever performed miracles in his mother's presence before? I have absolutely no idea. Like, we don't read a whole lot about Jesus' childhood in the Bible. Was he like making his blocks levitate? I don't, maybe? Was he like walking on water in the bathtub? Like, Mary's like, get down there so I can wash your hair. And Jesus is like, like walking on. It could have happened. Like, nowhere does it say it didn't. I like to think stuff like that happened. Like, he goes to fall in the toilet like all little kids do at some point, but he doesn't even get wet because he's just like floating on top of water. And his mom's like, okay, that's a creepy kid. It could have happened. That one probably didn't. But for whatever reason, whether he had performed a miracle in her presence before or not, Mary was convinced that Jesus could perform a miracle that day at the wedding. So she took a risk, and she opened her mouth, and she told the servants to follow Jesus' instructions, and she waited, expecting Jesus to do something incredible, and he did. I want you to take a couple things away from tonight's talk. Number one, Jesus can do whatever he wants with whatever he wants. He can turn water into wine. He can turn a Lunchable for one into lunch for 5,000. He can turn your failure into victory, your scars into beauty, your sorrow into strength, your pain into a story that changes someone's life. Jesus is full of glory, and he tends to reveal it in some pretty unexpected ways. Number two, I want you to listen closely to this, because this is what I want you to take away from tonight. sometimes Jesus waits until you open your mouth and invite others to get to know him, to show people what he's capable of. In other words, maybe your mom or dad, your neighbor, your teacher, your friend at school, maybe someone you know is really struggling. Maybe they're in an impossible situation, and the thing that they need the most is Jesus. Maybe Jesus is waiting to intervene, to do something in their life until you've opened your mouth and let them know that their problem isn't too big for Jesus. That Jesus can take care of whatever it is that they're struggling with. Maybe Jesus is waiting on you to have a conversation about him with that person so that when things start looking up, when the problem is fixed, when Jesus reveals his glory, they don't credit fate or karma or good luck. They credit Jesus. They give him praise and glory for whatever happened because you pointed them in his direction. To sum it up, if you're a follower of Jesus, there's a good chance that you've experienced firsthand that he can do big things. Tell other people about Jesus and the big things that he can do in their lives. I was reminded of this concept just over the past couple weeks. I've done stuff in the public middle schools around here for the last 6 years, right? And there's this teacher at Hamilton, and she retired earlier this year. But she was a tough one. Like I don't know that we ever had a legitimate conversation when I was there. She was always real standoffish. I always got the vibe I wasn't really welcome from her. And I was friends with her on Facebook, and a lot of the stuff that she posted, it wasn't necessarily anti-God. It was just like God's not part of the equation, you know? Like, you've seen posts like this. Somebody offers to pray for somebody, and it's like, no, I don't need your prayers. I just need your sunshine and good vibes, right? It's like, I don't hate God, but I'm not interested. And that's how this lady was. But over the course of 3 or 4 years serving at Hamilton, investing in the kids, taking breakfast over to the teachers, filling in as a sub wherever they needed me, whatever. Apparently, at some point, the conversations that I was having with the kids and the staff and the notes that I was leaving for the teachers, at some point it made a difference. Because back probably 3 or 4 months ago, she leaves a comment on some picture that I posted on Facebook saying, you know, throughout your years serving at Hamilton, I watched the way that you interacted with the kids and the way that you served the teachers, and it left me longing for the relationship with God that I had when I was younger. And over the past few months, I've decided to start exploring my relationship with God again. And just over the past month or so, she has started posting devotionals on her Facebook page. She has started posting encouragement to other teachers, like offering to pray for them and talking about her struggle against God, that how God has drawn her back in. And it's one of those things that, like, had I not shown up and just showed Jesus in a really practical way, the turn in her life towards something better most likely would have been credited towards karma or fate or good luck. But because I was there actively living for Jesus and leaving encouraging notes to the teachers, and I'm not saying that I'm the only element in this woman's turn back to Jesus. I mean, I think a lot of other stuff probably happened to get her there. But that note that she sent me is like, okay, sometimes in order for Jesus to really show up in somebody's life, for him to really start working those miracles in somebody's life, we need to take the first step and do what we can do for that person, whether it's through words, or through actions, or through a note, or through a Facebook comment, through a free muffin and Starbucks drink for breakfast. Sometimes we need to take that first step before Jesus is willing to like throw open the floodgates and do his thing. Because Jesus knows how we work, right? Like, we're going to credit everything else possible for the good stuff happening in our life before we credit him for it. Because we tend to run to Jesus when things are really hard, really crappy, but then when something really good's happening, it's like, I'm good, right? Like, that's typically how it works. And that's probably how it would have worked in this story. Like, had the wine just appeared? Like, had Jesus just been like, okay, Mom, snapped his fingers, there's wine in the jars? Do you think the credit would have gone to Jesus? Do you think the glory would have gone to God? Probably not. Like, the groom probably just would have played it off like, I bought enough wine. I planned ahead. But there was no way that it could have been played off that way. Because Mary opened her mouth and was like, hey, I got your solution. Your solution is Jesus. So here's what I'm getting at tonight. You do have a responsibility to open your mouth and talk about Jesus with people. You do. It's called the Great Commission. Go into all the world, preach the gospel, making disciples. Like, there's no way to get around it. And I know that the majority of you come from some kind of sticky situations. Like, you're kind of into the Jesus thing, but nobody at home is. You're kind of into the Jesus thing, but nobody in your friend group is. You're kind of into the Jesus thing, but nobody at your school seems to be. Well, maybe some of them would get into the Jesus thing if you just open your mouth and talk about him. Because maybe as soon as you talk about Jesus a little bit, Jesus is just waiting for this opportunity to be like, okay, so you introduced them to me, and now I'm going to show off. And that might just be what it takes to get them to a relationship with Jesus. So open your mouth. Make sure that your actions line up with what you're saying. And maybe just maybe they'll come to know Jesus, right? But I do want to, just one more side note here. I said make sure that your actions line up with what you're saying. That is so stinking important. There's this kid, I've been subbing at Vandy a bunch here lately. There's this kid that wears a North Christian School hoodie almost every single day. And the first day I'm subbing, I walk up, I'm like, hey man, did you go to North Christian School? Yeah, my parents pulled me out this year and brought me over here. And I'm like, oh yeah, I went to North when I was a kid. I'm gonna tell you something. There ain't nothing Christian about that kid. Like, he's standing up cussing teachers out in class and calling girls dirty names, and I mean, one day I called him out on it. I'm like, dude, I really wish you just wouldn't even wear that hoodie. Like, you're making us look bad. I'm not really into it. I'm like, then don't wear the hoodie. Listen, if you're going to go share the gospel and be a terrible human being, then just keep your mouth shut. Because I don't want you making me and the other people who are serious about Jesus, and more importantly, making Jesus look bad. So I'm not saying you got to have it all together, but I'm saying you better let the Holy Spirit work out the stuff that's really rough in your life before you go telling somebody else to get their act together. Because I don't want you going to school and cussing somebody out and then being like, oh yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, and then you flip the teacher off. Like, that ain't no good. If you're really a Christian, God's going to be doing some work in your life, and you're going to be different because of it. And if you're not different, and you claim to be a Christian, you might not be a Christian. So, there's another conversation for another time. So, I've been pretty hard on you guys the last couple weeks. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need slapped around a little bit, right? So we're gonna pray, we're gonna sing, and we're gonna break up into a couple groups. Again, girls, you're gonna stay in this general area, guys, you're gonna go through the hallway, and we'll say through the hallway and to your right into the back room over here. So as soon as we're done singing, I'm just gonna say, hey, break into your groups. We'll spend about 15 minutes in our groups, and then, mission team, we're gonna meet here. Cool. Alright, God, I ask that as we close this thing out tonight, as we sing a couple songs and talk in our groups, that you'll connect the dots between what has been said tonight and what needs to happen in our lives. God, I first of all, I pray for the students in this room who do not have a personal relationship with you. God, I'm sure that there are some people in this room who just know they don't, they know they're not a Christian. God, do whatever you need to do in their lives to get them to the point that they want to be. I pray for the students in this room who think that they're Christians, but there's absolutely no fruit to show it. I pray that you would work in their lives and either convict them of what they're doing or draw them to yourself for salvation. And God, lastly, I pray for the students in this room who know and love Jesus. I pray that those students will be willing to open their mouths and talk about Jesus, will be willing to live like Jesus in hopes that somebody hears, somebody takes notice. And then God, I pray that when those people hear and when they take notice, you'll just throw open the floodgates and do something crazy and just show off to the people that these students are sharing the gospel with, so that they will really just have no other choice but just to cave in and follow you. God, use this group of students to make a difference. We pray this in your name. Amen. Yeah, let's stand up and sing.
How quickly forget the God who lives in every day. How easy to lose sight that you remain until Monday. How quickly we forget the power that's running through our veins. The kind of power that through the oceans, you can break through these chains. If you would make the mountains, it could move them all the same. And if death could not hold you, and it's still on his face, then the power that raised you is about to move again. If you broke through the oceans, you can break through these chains. If you would make the mountains, it can move them all the same. And if death fell before you, and it's still on his face, the power that raised you is about to move again. Oh, my soul, remember who you're talking to. The only one that death bows to. That's the God who walks with you. Oh, my soul, remember if he did it then, he can do it all again. His power can still raise the dead. So don't tell me that he's finished yet. Oh, my soul, remember who you're talking to. The only one that death bows to. That's the God who walks with you. Oh, my soul, you know that if he did it then, he can do it all again. His power can still raise the dead. Don't tell me that he's finished yet. There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the sea. Should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears a burden, where another died for me. There was another in the fire. All my debts that were dead beneath the waters, I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in